the Finance Committee meeting for February 2nd to order. This meeting will be video recorded and can be seen on local channel 18 and on the town's website at www.eastham-ma.gov. This meeting is a Zoom meeting pursuant to the emergency order of Governor Baker. Okay, so we're going to start. I'm going to switch the agenda slightly right away because Jackie has a tea time meeting as well, and we want to move forward and get part of what she wants to be part of here first, and then she can join into the tea time meeting. So we're going to go right to the FY22 budget items, and I know Rich has sent around some information to you today based upon, and George is not on yet, but in part some of the questions, I guess, that George had submitted to Rich. So I'm going to turn it over to Jackie to start, and you can turn it over to Rich whenever. Jackie?
I'm coming. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay.
I'm not multitasking very well. This is the first time I've done two meetings simultaneously, and I think I'm going to do nothing well tonight. But Rich and I wanted to get back to you because we realized after there was the discussion on our first meeting about salaries going up so drastically, and then we got a memo from, or an Excel spreadsheet from George on Friday, and we realized what the problem was. So I want to turn it over to Rich to explain why it looks like these increases are over 1 year and not two, and why there's an issue with the numbers.
What issue are we talking about? We didn't see George's.
No.
Oh, okay.
We don't know what the problem is that you're solving today.
Right.
So the problem that you identified on the first night that we met was a huge increase in salaries in some of the top positions. And I just assumed you were talking about my salary alone. But what George was identifying is that all of the salaries were off between what was reported in the comparison of FY21 versus FY22. And the FY22 numbers are absolutely correct. But Rich is going to walk you through what the issue is. And then as we get to each budget, we can talk about the numbers. And I believe he did send you one spreadsheet, right, Rich? Did you?
Yeah. I didn't send that spreadsheet, but I'm happy to talk to it and where we can send it out later.
Okay.
But what this is, being my first time through here with Eastham, I kind of revamped some of the budget process. And really important to me is the salary projections, kind of, being the largest expense of the town. So I spent a lot of time doing the salary projection for FY22 and kind of revamping on the HR side how we do that. And so what I would say is that for FY22, and my experience generally, is that salary budgets pretty much are actual. We budget for the position, for the person who's in the position for the year coming up as best, with the best information we have at the time. We're doing it a bit in advance, so of course subject to change. But that wasn't necessarily how it was done in the past, and I guess that was my oversight. So the prior years, the budget didn't necessarily reflect the actual for the position. So that was the first thing. So there's a little bit of a perspective difference between FY22 and 21. And of course, this is the first time you've had a comparison within the salary detail. Usually you're just getting that year. And, hindsight being 2020, perhaps in this first time through with this change in procedure, I might not have done a comparative and just started it last year when we were on the same basis for 2 years in a row. But, I didn't, so we are where we are. So there's a little bit of a difference because of that.
If the old number didn't reflect what people actually made, what did it reflect?
Well, I'll give you an example in a second, but let me just wrap up my train of thought before I lose it, if you don't mind. And also the prior year amounts didn't necessarily reflect changes in personnel that you might see. So what I would expect in the future, now that we try to do this budget to be essentially the actual of a person or a position, is if somebody changes, for example, gets a promotion and goes from a patrolman to a sergeant, you'd see two slots for the patrolman, you know, the one where that person was and then where the replacement's going to be versus them as where the original sergeant was and what the new sergeant's got. So you'd have a multiple. We didn't have that last year in the past, and I didn't take the time to go back and recreate that, which is what I'd have to do to have a full comparison. And then really what compounds all that issue, that in of itself isn't huge, but the larger of all these issues is, if you recall, last year we had all our contract settlements, and all the money associated with those contract settlements was about $367,000, I think, was voted as a separate article. It wasn't in the operating budget. And so when you compare those budgets, so I have to go back and allocate that article money across the operating budgets. And at the time when I put this first draft of the budget book together, we hadn't even done that. This was in the fall of last year, just after town meeting. So then George did an analysis line by line, and I come to realize that really what that analysis was showing was the FY22 rates as presented, which are fine and haven't changed from what we've been talking about, but to not really the FY21 rates, but really the FY20 rates. So there's essentially a 2-year gap. And so what I resent to you today for the departments we're talking about tonight is with those salaries properly allocated. And an example of what I'm talking about, if you were to look in that budget book at the fire department, it's just the cleanest example. It shows all the fire department salaries by position. And for FY21, at the bottom of all that list, you'll see the allocation of the FY21 contract settlement of about $113,000. That amount really needs to be spread amongst every single position. And I just didn't go back and do that, this being the first year. It's not going to be a problem going forward because it's built into our salary projection now. But this first year, it was part of the issue. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. And that's why when if you try to compare a specific line in any department's salary detail to the corresponding item of the prior year, it may or may not be accurate.
So basically, we take the FY21 line item for a salary budget, then we have to add the first year of the contract settlement, which was a COLA and a step. And then that number together should have been what FY21 was in the FY21 column. Instead, what you got was the original number that went to town meeting without the settlement added in. So what you're seeing when you see an 11% raise is 2 years, the first year and next year's.
So Jackie?
Yeah.
At the beginning of our meeting, you referred to the fact that I raised this issue last week or whenever we met last, and that you suspect that I was talking about your salary and some other, and I was, yours and the town clerk's. The comparative information that Rich sent us more than satisfied me on both those positions. It just seemed like you and Cindy were on very solid ground. That's my personal opinion anyway.
Okay, I think thank you so much, Steve. I think it was just that we were kind of confused because we didn't realize Rich and I didn't realize what happened. And I think it was especially Rick and George that brought these concerns up. And I was thinking to myself in my head, we don't have 11% increases, but then I looked at the figures and Rich and I figured it out. So I'm sorry for the confusion. And as we go through each budget, we'll get the right numbers to you. Rich will be able to explain it. And this only happens every 3 years or every 4 years sometimes. But so next year should be smooth. And we'll have good comps.
Yeah, I want to thank you for the explanation. Thank you, George, for going at it. One of the things that brings this up is we're required by law, the town is required by law to have the town approve the union contracts. So that last year's, the budget for FY21 that was brought to the town meeting in September had the salaries in there without the union, the new agreements, because the town had not approved the agreements. That's why there was a separate article for 300 and whatever $1,000. And that didn't get, and the numbers we were sent, that didn't get rolled back item by item by item in the budget. It was just rolled back to the fire department had $118,000 more to go in and so forth. And that's part of that. That's the issue. So we were really comparing total numbers. The comparison was correct, but when you get down below that, it wasn't really apples to oranges. It was probably Granny Smith's to Macintosh kind of apple exchange, and that's what was the reason. And George, thank you so much for catching it, raising it, so we could better understand as we go through this FY22 budget. Any other comments or questions?
And just to give some context, so as you go through the budgets tonight, that being said, there are raises within these budgets. And so by and large, what you'll see, especially with what I just resent out earlier today, if you went back and look at it, by and large, you're going to see several people with roughly a 4.5% increase and several people with a 5.5% increase. So the 4.5 is for our Eastham Employee Association bargaining unit. They got a 2% COLA, and the step increases are 2.5%, so that equals 4.5. And our non-union personnel code staff got also have 2.5% steps and got a 3% COLA. And these are based on a classification study done in 2017, finalized in 2017, that feed into our classification plan. So those are on the administrative and staff type positions, those are the two most common. There are a couple exceptions to that, and as we go through the departmental budgets, I'm happy to point those out and tell you why they're different other than those amounts there.
Okay. Well, we might as well, since we're on this subject, we might as well move on right into FY22. And we were going to talk about the, let's see, the elected departments first. And if you have your book with, it starts
Jerry,
on,
I'll share the screen if you'd like.
yeah, you can bring them scene. It starts at page 37 if you have your book. Is the elected and general budget summary as we go through.
Which page, Jerry?
37 of 194. And the detail, the real detail comes a little bit later. Where are we here? Okay, so George, not George, excuse me. I'm sorry, George, I was picking on you there. But you're, Rich, you can lead us through the elected and general budget summaries.
Okay, and can everybody see the screen okay?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
What are you using, Rich? Are you using what you sent out this afternoon, or are you using the original figures that were in the budget book that we got a month ago?
For elected in general, this is the 12/15/2020 version. There's been no change in that.
Okay.
And this really represents just a couple line items. Select board member salaries for 13,000 and the reserve fund for 100,000. There's not much more to it than that. I did include these in the operating budget traditionally, other than the reserve fund. They have been shown in another article, but I'm trying to consolidate our warrant into, and the operating budget's all into one, complete comprehensive budget. And so they're showing as part of the operating budget this year.
So Rich, the book I'm looking at my desk here is the binder that you helpfully prepared for me. I don't know what date that was, but the numbers I have are not the same.
Yeah,
I have 83,000 in the reserve fund.
No, you're right. I must have just put the wrong, I'm sorry, Steve, you're right. I should look at my own book. But it is,
Is this the second set of books you're keeping?
yeah, sorry about that. It's 13 and 83.
Okay, good. Well, that's what I have. Thank you.
And, hang on, let me just try this again. I also just want to share this. This is what the Article 2 looks like at the moment. And here's those amounts rolling into the FY22 budget.
What reserve fund is that, Rich?
That's the Finance Committee Reserve Fund that would come to you if we need money out of. Ed initially had wanted that to be a higher amount, as we talked about, for a couple reasons. And if we have the opportunity, as we finalize the budget, we might suggest that you add a little bit back, but we have to see if that shakes out. The other thing I can just point out, it's not on this budget per se, but just an overall. As you recall, when I first presented this budget, with the best information we had about $664,000 of levy capacity. We've gotten some good news since then. The elementary school budget came in quite a bit lower, and our Barnstable County Retirement Association assessment came in a bit lower. So this spreadsheet here, the summary spreadsheet, reflects those changes. And so if you look at these compared to what you received originally, it would be a little bit different. But I'm just going to show you the bottom line now. Because of those reductions at the moment, the budget is up $1 million, just over 3%. The big number we're waiting on is the regional school district assessments. And once we have a better handle on that, then we can talk about adding some things back, like the reserve fund increase.
Yeah, now, that would be, though, the original stuff was on pages 19 and 20, I think, in the booklet you handed out. Let me see.
Yes.
Yeah, so what, yep. So say it again, the grand total budget that you had for fiscal 22 here was 32,707. What's the one you were just showing us, Rich?
Show you again.
32,448,173.
3244, okay. Mm-hmm.
So again, that represents a decrease because of the elementary school and the pension assessment.
Right. And so the total percentage increase was, let me see here. Instead of 4.17, no, that's still, we still don't have, it's 3.35.
Right.
We still don't have the
Nauset Regional.
Nauset Regional budget, right? Okay, thank you.
But I just mentioned that in the context, because as we go through these budgets, and this was the first case where with the reserve fund, originally we had talked about trying to get that back up a little bit more because of COVID and other reasons. And we didn't because of limitation on funds, but if we have an opportunity, that might be an area where we would, on the final pass of this, add back a few bucks to that.
Right, Rich, there's another, sorry to be hitting you, the reserve fund, is that, I know it's limited what we can use it for, but COVID issues, would that be a valid use of the reserve fund? And if the health department needed more things, or if some departments had some problem, additional expenses due to COVID and we didn't have revenue coming in from somewhere else?
Yeah,
Okay,
The legal definition of the reserve fund is anything that's extraordinary or unforeseen.
okay.
But there's some pretty wide latitude associated with that.
The only thing I caution from my first tenure at the finance committee was that the accountant may not agree always. You need to be careful as to
Okay.
what's foreseeable and what isn't.
Yeah, well, we would have to work it. I'm just wondering, just
Yeah.
in my mind, Steve, where was this? Mary, I think you had a question or wanted to raise something?
I wanted to know how much of the 80,000 has been spent so far for fiscal year '21?
I don't think-
We haven't done anything yet.
Yeah,
We haven't signed anything off on that, right?
I didn't think so.
We've been lucky so far in that, to the extent we've had COVID-associated expenses, it's been covered with CARES Act funds.
Right,
We got relatively good news, at the moment anyway, until it changes, and it's not good news. But FEMA has indicated that they're expected to cover 100% of vaccination clinic costs.
Mhm.
And so we'll be able to move forward on that. And, again, probably won't have to come back to you as long as that bears out as they've indicated.
And how long do we have to use the CARES money? I know it was originally December, what's it now?
It's now this December of this year. It was extended a year.
Oh, it's extended for a whole year.
Yeah. We don't have a ton of that left, but
Yeah, I know.
we did a good job of making sure we got what we needed, with knowing that there was a pending deadline coming up.
Right.
I didn't want to be sitting on, there's some towns out there sitting on, several $100,000 of unspent when they had actual need, and it was going to have to go back. And then the day before, they got the extension, which they lucked out on. But I also do think that we're going to get a supplemental on the CARES Act, but we'll have to see how that bears out as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone have any questions on this budget? I mean, we've got, basically, it's the reserve fund and the salaries for the moderator and the salaries for the select board. Okay, we'll move on to the next, which I think is the town administration, which starts on page 43. Everybody there? Did I lose people? No, there you are. Okay. Go ahead, Rich. You're muted, Rich, I think.
Just make sure I got the right one this time. And here we go. So this one that's in front of you on the screen here is a little different than the original that's in the book, but only to the extent of the FY21 salary detail. The totals haven't changed on 22. And I'll let Jackie speak to it about to the extent she wants to, or you have questions. But here's the summary of it. It consists of the full-time salaries, temporary salaries, expense accounts for the admin budget, legal services, which is town council, one line item, and our central purchasing, which is largely supplies and copier leases. Here's the detail. The difference from what you have, you can see that these two amounts here have changed for the FY21. These are pretty much actuals. Those received the allocations from that article, so I updated it for that. So you do that comparison, you'll see that the executive assistant is a 5.5% increase, which is the 2.5 and the 3 step and COLA. This position is a 6.5 just about, which is also a 2.5 and 3. But in this case, this position transitioned from the EEA bargaining unit to our personnel code, and the pay scales are such that that also contributed to a 1% bump in this case as well. As far as expenses, they're very consistent. Nothing new in this array of numbers. It's $49,000 last year. It's $49,000 this year. There's the 80,000 for the town council. And here's the detail on the central purchasing, postage, printing, and copier leases being the main items. Electronic voting is also a big item that's a piece of this.
What do
Where's
you
the
mean
electronic voting?
for town meeting? Is that where it's coming from?
I'm sorry, Steve?
You mean the devices at town meeting? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Thank you.
What are you recommending, or what are you thinking is going to happen with COVID still, and we're still in the midst of COVID as far as upcoming meetings? Town meeting.
Well, we haven't quite talked to that yet. I think Jackie's been thinking about that and perhaps doing something similar to what we did last year, but I'll let Jackie speak to that.
Yeah, pretty much. I think the feedback from the outdoor town meeting was so positive that we'll probably be trying to plan an outdoor town meeting regardless. I mean, we know we're not going to get 100% vaccination by May 3rd. So I think we'll probably still be trying to figure out how to do an outdoor meeting.
So at this point, you're still planning on the normal schedule, just having it outside? And then-
That's correct. Or maybe move it to that Saturday, the Saturday after.
Right.
And here's
Saturday.
the, how's that looks at on the article. That's a 5.88% increase, all due to salaries.
Okay. Any further questions on the town administration? All right, now we can go to finance. We can rip Rich's budget apart here now.
Yeah, so here's the municipal finance, and this does have a bigger increase of 6.59%. Obviously, the salaries are the biggest number that changed there, but we'll get to those in a second. I just want to mention under IT, because this will be an ongoing issue in the upcoming years. Everything's moving to the cloud and is becoming subscription based. Even, the old Microsoft Office and Word, you no longer are buying licenses once and then you writing that license for a number of years and then replacing it. It's all these companies now requiring to buy subscriptions, which is driving up licensing fees. So this is an area where we can expect to see some increase. There's not too much we can do about that unless we just decide not to use a particular product or application. So that's really our choice. Obviously, we try to manage how many licenses or subscriptions we would buy and make sure they're being utilized, and our IT director is on top of that. Let me go to the departmental summaries now. So here's a summary page. Again, the FY22 numbers haven't changed, but along the lines of what I just mentioned, mentally, until we know how things are shaking out, likely we'll have to make an add to the IT expense. One of the licenses that we need to start providing for is our Microsoft Teams, and that wasn't part of what was compiled and put together. So when we do the final version of this, might include a few extra bucks associated with that. But here's what the budget looks like for the town meeting summary. Really, the only change in expenses of any magnitude is the treasurer collector. That has to do with our outside payroll service mostly, and a few extra bucks related to tax title taking, since we are on a pretty good routine now where we're trying to make this a matter of course. So we're doing tax title takings annually and not skipping years. Here's the salary detail. This column here has been updated from what's in your book to reflect the correct salary salary allocations from the contract settlement article. In this, almost all of these are either the 4.5% or the 5.5% increases I mentioned to you. Our treasurer collector increase is a bit more. That's about just under 13%. So that the reason for that is 5.5% like everybody else under the personnel code, but an additional little over $7,000 because we increased the hours. It was a 35-hour per week position, and we now have made it a 37.5 an hour per week position, reflecting her workload. She's routinely putting in over 40. And so I'm working with her on how to manage workload to hopefully get her down under 40. But in any event, the workload is such in that office that it justified the additional hours.
Rich?
Yes.
For the 535,000 operational and program costs for 20,000, what is that? Something new here?
What do you? Oh, I created a new category. I'll bring this up again when I find it myself here.
It's 5,000, $20,000. It's a
Under
new,
IT.
it's a new line item.
Yeah. Hang on, I'll bring that back up again. So under the IT budget, what I'm trying to do here, it didn't really change anything. It's just more of moving things around. A lot of this stuff was under professional and technical and licenses. And ultimately, what I'd like to do is have this line item be essentially just the licenses, and then our subscriptions be down under the operational. I started with that one item because it's it wasn't so much in the past, and as growing up, it was an individually significant item that I could easily pick out and do that with. But you know, this is just a matter of classification. It existed in the past. It was just mixed in with other things. And I'm trying to be a little bit more detailed in our complete compilation of the budget so that if there's turnover or questions, we know what's in versus not in. It's a little easier to see exactly what's in the budgets. The biggest driver, and again, to my earlier comment as to the increase in costs of subscriptions and licenses, our financial management system, Munis, is the single biggest item, and it's going to be about $50,000 this year, which seems like a lot, and it is. In Yarmouth, the cost to me was about $120,000, and that was for essentially the same things, but we're just a bigger town, so they gouged us more. But we get a little bit more value here in that they entirely host our financial management platform, which means we have no liability for security and all that good stuff. So we get a lot of service out of that money spent, a lot of security as well.
Thank you.
It also has to do with our ability to respond and be available during a crisis or a natural disaster. With the way this is hosted off-site by Munis, we can really log in from anywhere and execute financial transactions, process payroll, things like that. Whereas if we had an on-site system on our servers, you know, we got to make sure we have our own internal procedures and backups and things like that.
Okay. And anyone have any more questions concerning the finance department? All right, I think the next one is the clerk and elections budget.
Yeah, the town clerk is a pretty straightforward and simple budget. It's up just under 6%, all of it, which is salaries. And so the biggest driver of that salary increase, as we was in the memo I forwarded earlier today. But if you didn't get a chance to see that, we had a request from our elected town clerk to go up from 72,000 to 80,000. And let me see if I can find this budget here. So that's reflected here in her salary detail. And along with that request, she sent us a memo, which I forwarded to you in that email today, kind of showing the comparable town clerks in all the surrounding communities. And at that requested salary, it puts her at the, still the second from the bottom. I think Wellfleet is just a couple $1,000s less, but all the other clerks are a bit higher, which could reflect some longevity or experience. But in any event, it's a comparable salary based on what she provided.
Right. Does any, now, the costs for, early voting, remote voting, and so forth, is that all included in this budget? Or is that, is it elsewhere? Or did the state handle, the postage and all that, for that, effort?
Now, this budget has absorbed all the costs associated with the multiple elections. It does get reimbursed from the state for some elements, which is by law goes to a separate fund that she can draw on for costs associated with any particular election. But I think by and large, we've been able to accommodate it. It really hasn't been too much extra cost. It's really been just the time and effort of the staff, which is, putting in their extra time to get done what needs to get done. I do think Jackie had to step away, but I suspect that probably the central purchasing budget might have supplemented some additional postage need to the extent there was any.
Okay. And this year, we should have a little bit fewer elections likely. I think we have clearly the school budget election, but I think we won't have the primaries. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Do you anticipate having mail-in voting for every election upcoming, or?
I don't know that I know that. I'd have to have Cindy get back to us on that. I think so, but it's not really my purview.
Yeah.
I hate to misspeak on that.
So the majority of the cost of having all of that over these past number of months is essentially overtime for handling it all.
Yeah, except we don't pay overtime for the elected official. For our office staff, we do, but that's been minimized, and to the extent there has been some, it's been used as comp time, comparable, comp time off in lieu of overtime.
Mm-hmm. All right. Does anyone have any further questions? I mean, discussion. I know Steve Cole already said that he read what Cindy requested and was fairly positive with that. Any issues? Anybody have any issues with anything there in the clerk's office?
No.
Nope, I agree.
All right. So let's see. What do I have next? Council of Aging. That's a little bit further down.
I'll just start with the overall here. So we've, in our presentation, we've compiled it under community services, an element of that, but it is its own department. So we're looking at the COA salaries and the COA expense line. And I show you the departmental budget. The expenses haven't changed much, actually a small decrease. We did reallocate some of that money. There's now more money in the food program, which I'll show you when we look at that budget. And the salaries are all contractual wage increases, which were revised for the allocation, which I'll show you as well. So let me bring that up. So again, this is the February 1st, 2021 version, so it doesn't match exactly in your book for the FY21 amounts. We're looking at the COA. Here's the salary detail. Again, these amounts, in the original version that you have, if you happen to be looking at it, there's actually an amount down here, $9,000 some odd dollars. That was the whole amount of the amounts to be allocated to this department for the salary allocation. I just hadn't split it amongst the positions, but I did in this version and got rid of that and put it where it belonged in the individual salaries. So now when you do that comparison, this is an example. These would be pretty much actual to actual for both years. And what you'll see in those, if you were to take the percentages, is 3 out of 4 of those are the 4.5% increases, the 2.5 step and the 2% COLA. And the administrative assistant is a 7% increase, 4.5 for the step and COLA, and an additional 3 because part of our bargaining with the union to settle that contract was to regrade that position, which resulted in a additional increase for that position where it was didn't adequately reflect the pay scale that it was assigned, and so that regrading results in a higher salary. And so that one position has more than the 4.5 for that one reason.
Rich, does everybody get a step every year?
Yeah, so if you're a part of a collective bargaining unit at this point, which isn't uncommon, it's the way it is most places, the steps are automatic.
Every year, they're not for a few years at a piece or something.
And the one exception in our case is the police department. The way their contract is structured, for whatever reason, it goes back, number of years, I'm sure. They don't get a step every year. There are years where some of those positions skip a year and they get it every other year, but it's a much bigger step. So instead of a 2.5% step, you might get an 8% step every 2 years. So if you're averaged it out over time, it would be, roughly equivalent. But, you get that shock every other year that you might, as opposed to the gradual increase. And the way you manage that, I don't know if you manage it, the way you hopefully accomplish that is to the extent you have turnover, typically the newer employees come in at a lower step.
Right.
Is there a max on the step? There's so many steps, and once you no longer get step increases?
That's correct. Every contract's a little bit different, but on the police contract, right, you max out and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question. You mentioned that one of these positions was graded higher as a result of the negotiations. In the total sum of the negotiations, were there any positions that were graded lower?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Nice try.
In 2016 or 2017?
No, this last go round.
Whatever.
No, usually what we do is we eliminate the lower tier. Like we definitely have eliminated some positions and reorganized, but not downgraded a person's responsibilities, no.
So just as an overview, just to remind everybody, so we do have a classification plan that was recently looked at to set this, and when that was done, that outside consultant came in. It's a 10-step classification plan, 10 grades with 10 steps. And so those do pretty much, the grades are assigned to the position. We set those, but the steps automatically increase each year. The one thing that's new that came off of that, which gives us a little bit of latitude, and I do like, it's my experience in other places, and have actually implemented in other places over the years, is what's called an open merit plan. And so this is traditionally for the higher level managers or people that have a hard time recruiting. Typically those people don't like the step system. A lot of times they're mid-career professionals that are coming in and they don't fit into that system. But it also gives us the opportunity to require a performance review in order to get a raise. And so, hopefully by doing this at the higher level managers, that's something we could fit into these collective bargaining agreements over time. Unfortunately, it's hard to get never mind all of them, but if you can get started with one on some level for some of the positions, and then eventually work that into the whole agreement. But at least that prevents these things from being automatic, and you have some control. You have the ability to do performance reviews, and if you don't meet your performance objectives or performance level, you probably can't deny them a cost of living increase, but you could perhaps deny them a step. But that's, all stuff that's part and parcel of a negotiation. So that's something we'll worry about again in, 2.5 years for the next round.
Rich, I have a question. I see that the adult day program, you don't have anybody in there. And I know it was very popular before we had COVID. It looks like you're not anticipating starting that up again even in '22. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Any more, excuse me. Any more questions, comments, et cetera, on the Council on Aging? All right, so we've gone through what we planned on this, and this is our experiment, and be able to do it by Zoom, we can have more meetings. It's easier to make sure we get the quorum, and we'll see how this goes. So we're done with that section of looking at the budget at the moment. And I thank you for that. So let's go back on the agenda to the minutes, which I sent around twice. I sent around a corrected minutes. Anyone have any comments or correction, additions, deletions from them? If not, do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Russ seconded. I don't know who moved. Or was
Yeah.
it
I
Rick?
seconded Jerry.
Buck seconded and Rick moved. We want to make sure so for the minutes. Any further discussion? All in favor? I got to write. Mary,
Aye.
Steve Cole,
Aye.
Russ,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Rick.
Aye.
All right, I'm missing somebody here.
Peter, aye.
Oh, Peter. Sorry, Peter.
Problem.
And Jerry votes aye. So it's 8-0. Steve Zebel, by the way, I guess it's the end of the fiscal year, and he's going a little nuts there. So the next is to look at that rough draft letter. But I want to go with a first question before we get to that. In the letter, if you look at it, I say that we unanimously approved, are in favor of the school building project. I want to informally make sure that we're on the same road. So I'm going to go around and just ask informally, you can change, are you in favor or opposed to the Nauset Regional School building project? If we were going to have it as an article in a town warrant, would you vote yes to recommend? Okay, so we'll go around. We'll start. Mary, how would you do?
Yes.
Steve Cole? Yes. Pete?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Russ?
Strong, yes.
Tom?
I'd vote yes.
George?
Yes.
Rick?
Forrest, yes.
And Peter. Okay, that's okay. I understand.
I mean, that's how I
I
look
got
at it.
Peter already is a yes, and I would be a yes as well. Okay, so let's take a look at that rough draft that I put out. Let me explain three things what I was trying to do. The first, it's a letter to the editor. It's not an op-ed piece. It's not an opinion piece. It's not an analysis. So that it's short and tries to make a specific point and not be lengthy. Second, I wanted to try to avoid all the noise that's going around on the school building project, to try and focus on just the vote on March 30th. And the third thing was I used Peter's example of the boiler blowing or something of that sort, bringing the school up to code and avoiding any statement of what the town or the towns may or may not do if the project is defeated, because Jackie had said last meeting that the Massachusetts did not want us to talk about what might come later. So I just used that as an example, and that's pretty much why the letter is what it is. Now, I do have, you write something, I send it around. I do have a few thoughts to raise. One was right at the end where I talk about, near the end where it talks about that it would be at a higher cost to bring the building up to code. I thought that I might put a dash inferior product at a higher price. And the other thing, right at the second to the last paragraph, it ended that I thought voting no would be fiscally unreasonable. I still think that's probably better, but one of the words that I was considering was irrational rather than unreasonable. So those are only things that I was thinking about. And this is a rough draft. We don't have to finalize it today because we have other meetings, but I'd like to get through some real specifics if somebody wants to add things, take things out, make it stronger, weaker, whatever. So I open it up to all of you, and I have no pride of authorship at all on this.
Jerry?
Mary?
Yeah, you have the cost to bring NRHS up to code is 98 million. Is that exactly correct?
No, that's why there's question marks. That's right. Sorry, Mary. I couldn't remember the exact numbers, and I'm not sure whether
Do we have it?
exact numbers or round numbers to the millions.
It's an estimate, so maybe it would be better to say it's estimated to be approximately 98 million.
Is 98 correct?
Yeah.
I mean, correct in the sense that that's what it would cost, but
That's
the number.
Yeah, that's the quick and dirty estimate that the architect
Okay, that's the estimate.
Okay.
estimated. Yeah.
Now, I also don't have what's the full. I put 135, but I don't think that's right. The project. What is that, Peter?
It's rounds off to 132, and then that's in the end of the first paragraph, right?
Yeah, and then what's the amount coming from the state?
It's 36.6.
So we would pick up.
Leaves approximately 95. If you want to say approximately 95.
Yeah, do the approx. Because 95 million. Okay, I will gladly fix the numbers since when I was doing this, I just typed it up and didn't have them right in front of me. Okay.
Jerry,
Jackie.
they're estimating that our share, Eastham's share of that would be, as of today, 18,871,000. So a little under $19 million.
Right, and that would change. That would end up changing yearly is what we have to do depending upon the number of students. Is that right, Jackie?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't put that number in because we wanted to get this out to Cape Cod Times, Provincetown Independent, Cape Codder, so written to all the voters, not just Eastham voters.
I just wanted you to know.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I mean, I appreciate it.
Jerry, should we just say something in there about the fact that, as you say, you've mentioned the 4 towns, that the amount charged to each town each year is based on head count or something, or?
I don't think that's necessary, Mary. I
You
think
don't
that's detail that
Yeah.
reflects from what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah, there are enough, my thoughts, there are enough numbers floating
Right.
around with everybody saying this, that, or the other.
Mhm.
I tried to keep it as simple as possible but also try not to be embarrassed by being so simple in what we said. So that's why I didn't do it. I clearly don't want to get into how all those arguments about how much it's going to cost if you built a 600-person school and stuff. I mean, I want to avoid all of that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Jerry?
Russ.
Jerry, I think the purpose of this letter should be really a positive type of thing. And as with the least amount of issues that don't go to the point. And in that light, in the second sentence of the paragraph, we have heard many discussions and concerns until it goes to continue in the future. I think that should be eliminated. I don't think that goes as a positive to the point. I think that's, stuff that we just generally do. And after future, you have however on. I think that we should eliminate however, just go on March 30th, and it's a declarative sentence.
Yeah, What do people?
And then in paragraph 2, where the first sentence goes in, does not meet our codes, and in parentheses, our children deserve better. I would scratch our children deserve better and just go, does not meet current codes or educational needs.
See, being a mother, our children deserve better was my favorite line in the whole memo.
I
have been squashed again.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't know. That was my shot. But the educational, Russ, you bring up something that I thought about and didn't add, and so it's worth the discussion. And doesn't meet our educational needs. There's the current building, and I think I had 50 plus. Is the building only 50 years old?
That's a good number to use, 50.
Yeah, I think it is, right?
50.
Yeah.
I'll get rid of the plus.
And I guess, Jerry, the thing that impressed me most about this discussion, and I'll take back my comment about our kids deserve better, is that this is practical. The sticker shock of this price is just outrageous, and nobody can comprehend it as realistic. I mean, Peter and I have sat through these meetings. We've asked all kinds of comments, and it's not something we can wrap our heads around. But the truth is, any delay is going to cost us more. If we made the school smaller, it would still cost more, and we'd get a less durable, lasting product. And for you and I, Jerry, our master plan is to move the middle school there, and we're not going to be able to move the middle school to a campus with 2 or 3 less buildings, right? So none of it makes sense, but it makes even less sense to delay this,
Yeah.
And
I didn't put anything in about a delay would increase costs. I mean, a negative vote would delay any project, any effort, which of course would increase costs. I think I could probably try and work on adding a sentence like that in there. That's one I didn't think of, and
I guess the allegation that I'm hearing from the Brewster FinCom is if we make it smaller and we eliminate school choice, then we could get a good product for less money, right? And
Correct.
that, I do not believe that that is true. I just don't. And, you know,
It
Eastham
isn't
is
true.
the best example of this. Had we done a water system 10 years ago, we would have gotten 0% interest on our money and saved millions and millions of dollars. And waiting just made it bigger and more expensive.
Yeah. Well, I'll work on trying to add that and we'll send something around. What I don't want to do, I'll make it kind of general because I don't want to get into the argument. I think I've read something in one of the papers of they thought they could build a 600-person school for 81 million or something. I don't want to get into an argument on that because I don't think any of us have any expertise on that or have studied that.
And we don't
So-
want this letter to be a tit for tat type of
Right.
letter.
No.
Right.
Right.
We just wanted to be positive. Anything
Positive,
that
yeah.
there is in there that could suggest a negative should not be in there. That's my,
Right.
that's my opinion.
But
I have one other area that I'd like us to look at too, and that is the last sentence of the second paragraph, where you say we would have an,
You're muted, Russ. You're muted.
Self-muted.
yeah.
There you go.
I had the paper that I'm reading off on the computer and I touched it. But you say we would not have an old, smaller school. What I would like to see is to eliminate the smaller, just that we have an old school at a higher cost, and then maybe add in that does not fully meet today's educational needs.
Oh, I see. That might be a good place to put the educational needs.
Yeah.
Because
Because it's obvious, we must keep our children deserve better. Otherwise, we will lose our town administrator support.
So it
Never,
does not meet,
ever.
does not meet current educational needs? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I said, that does not meet fully.
Does not,
That does not fully meet today's educational needs.
okay. Now, does anyone else, I wanted to go back one thing that Russ said. I don't like eliminating, willing to rewrite, I don't like eliminating, we have heard many concerns, because that means I don't want to look like we're ostriches with our heads in the sand. I want to at least say, we've heard these things, but we don't need them. Those are things for another time, not for March 30th, but I don't know what others think.
Jerry, I'll tell you where my concern is in that. We have heard many discussions and concerns over how the project began, how the voting procedure was finalized, and how the building will be utilized. And in at least two of those three, there is a negative connotation in there that those things are still up for discussion. They're not up for discussion with us on this particular vote. I think that we've all come to the conclusion in different ways that this is the most practical way to go. And that's why I think it would be better to not get into that type of a situation.
I'm not certain that everyone on the committee agrees. This is all the most practical. It's almost like we have a plebiscite here, and it's up or down, and it is a mistake to go down.
Right.
Just my
Jerry?
comment, Jerry. Just-
Jerry,
You can do whatever you would like. Whatever the
No.
committee wants is fine.
Yeah, I understand. Listen, I appreciate your service. Rick, did you have something you wanted to say?
I agree with those points. I'm just, I think we have to somehow acknowledge the swirl of controversy around this. And then be laser focused like we are in the second paragraph on why it would be foolish not to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I think and maybe we can do it in a more positive language, but I think we should recognize in some way, the swirl of controversy. And
Okay.
make the point that I like what it says, in terms of, the only question we're faced with now as these communities is up or down.
Right.
Regardless of the swirl of controversy and how we got there.
Well, again, Jerry, I just add into it, your last sentence was, those discussions should continue in the future. That leaves, in my mind, a connotation that we aren't certain what we want here. And I want to be sure that the
I
message
see.
goes out there is,
I see your point there.
so I'll let the wordsmiths take care of that, whatever way they want.
All right, I see your point there, and I think I can, and as Rick said, maybe I can try and make it more positive. We'll work on that. This is still a
Work in progress.
a work in progress. Anybody else have other comments here? And I have just one other question before we were virtually almost ready to close. Any other comments on this?
Yeah.
Jerry, can I offer a comment? This is George.
Yes, you may, George.
Listening to all of the comments, it's pretty clear to me that my approach to this thing would be a very distinct minority. But my view of this thing is that you have to be aggressive. This is a voter issue. You have to convince people to vote the way you want them to vote. And that requires a certain amount of aggressiveness. One of the things that concerns me is that all of this noise that's going on is having a bigger impact than the very logical, factual, sensible argument that your letter represents. People, I'm afraid, don't understand the nuances, even though this has been in the press for years. And if you don't somehow address that, then I think that the risk is that the vote will go the wrong way. And I wouldn't get into the weeds on the arguments, but one of the things that is most lacking in the counter arguments is there is no plan B. There is no plan B. They don't like something, but they're not saying, we'll do this. And in the absence of a plan B, we're living with a crappy school and a big need to retain the quality of teachers and students that the school has had and continues to have. Plan B is going to end up in a disaster because there's not going to be anything. If this thing gets voted down, I don't have a clue because I'm not nearly familiar enough with the process. All I know is that it's taken at least 5 years to get to where we are. So if you blow up what it took 5 years to get, how long is it going to take to get to Plan B?
Minimum
Right.
3 years.
That's a good point. It's also, I mean, I've worked in the government, and if you go through and you have 50 applications and you can only pay for 5, and you pick one of the 5 and then they vote it down, you sit there and say, hey, these guys didn't have their act together. Let's get somebody else. So, I mean, I understand that too. So maybe I can put in, let me try and add a little bit of that, not making this very long, maybe a sentence or two here. That's all, to try and do it. And we'll get back. I'll get it back to you by the weekend. I'll promise that. I'll get it, and we will talk about it again next meeting after we're through. But I think we've gone. Next meeting will probably be more just wordsmith on this, and then we would have to figure out when we want to put it in the paper. I have to find out. Jackie, will there be early voting on this? Do you know?
No, I don't think so. Maybe, well, we'll have a 2-week period and we'll have a mail-in period, but I don't think they're gonna do early voting. I'll have to check.
Okay, but there'll be a mail-in period. That's the thing. I think we would want to get this into newspapers before that 2-week mail-in period.
Yeah.
So you're looking at March 30th, you got to go back 2 weeks, probably 3 weeks from there. That's when we want to try and get it submitted. That's all. The other question, yep. Mary, was that you?
No,
No,
that
that was me.
was Jackie, I think.
Go ahead. I just wanted to give you a piece of information that I just got from Greg Lavassier. And, you know, we spent some time talking about, could we start over again with this project and how long would it take? And, you know, the Brewster Town Administrator is telling me, oh, you could get this funded by the MSBA again. It'll just take a few years. And I'm like, why would they? They've now waited patiently with us for, you know, almost 2 years with this funding offer. And there is something like 400 and so many applications every year. They pick less than 100. So there's a 20% chance. And there's never been a case where a town has refused the grant and then been offered it again.
Okay. Russ, you're muted, Russ. You're mute. You're on mute.
Jerry?
Yeah,
Yes.
Jerry?
Is that Steve?
That's Steve.
It's Steve. Steve.
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, go ahead.
I think George made it. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm
Yes.
not sure because my internet's down and I'm on cellular now. I think George made really a very, very important point. This isn't about what the Finance Committee has already decided. This is about persuasion of others. Otherwise, there's no reason to write this at all. And one of the downsides of keeping it short, which I agree with, and not getting into every argument that's out there and not making it defensive, is what you're essentially left with here is that this 98 million or, 95 million or 130 million is all about avoiding the risk if a boiler goes. And I think there needs to be at least something here about this is a very positive thing for the community. It's not only to be protecting against the risk, but there's affirmatively positive reasons to be rebuilding this school. And what's more, if we don't, we're up the creek. And I don't know what kind of words, and I'm not talking, and along this point of being positive, as Russ says, I think those sentences that he was concerned with are good because they basically say, as you do, Jerry, we know there's a lot of stuff out there now, but it has nothing to do with what you're being asked to vote on. And that's an important point. So anyway.
Okay. Russ, I think you wanted to say something as well?
yeah, on the discussion that we were having just a minute or two ago, Peter sent out an email today that Harry Tartanian wrote in the Cape Codder.
Yeah.
It really slams that 600 student school and what it would be. And it doesn't even say that the day that school goes functional, the Nauset Regional School System loses over $3 million and then $2 million every year thereafter, because all of the choice students that come into the school would be eliminated. We could not take them in. I mean, it's, if you haven't read it, read it. It is the best piece that I've seen positively written on the school.
All right. I'm going to give a try in this. The one question I want to ask you, if we get this done and we approve it, do we put all our name, from the Eastham Finance Committee or the Eastham Finance Committee, and put our names in? I have no problem putting my name on it, but what do you guys think?
If it's
I'll put my
unanimous,
name on it.
yeah, if it's unanimous, you don't have to put the names on it, but.
Right.
We don't have to, but I thought it might be a bit more effective if we wrote our names.
Sure.
I was thinking of the Declaration of Independence, but that's, that kind of, this is nothing like that.
I was thinking,
Somebody's gonna keep this in perpetuity.
We're not gonna hang together or hang apart, are we, Jimmy?
That's right. Okay,
Couldn't
we
you
got
just,
that.
you could just put unanimously,
Approved,
yeah,
unanimously
like that.
approved by the Eastham
Yeah.
Board of Finance.
Okay, we'll do that. All right. So I'll redo that, try and get something to you by the weekend, and back to the agenda.
Art has his hand up.
Jerry,
Yeah,
I don't know if you know it, but there's a 250-word limit for Cape Cod Times letters to the editor.
okay, I'll have to see how long that is. Thank you.
Yeah, you
Hey,
do have to
Jerry?
count them.
Jerry, just a
Yeah.
couple of things, Peter, just a couple of things. So,
Peter, yeah,
In that second paragraph about the boiler breaking,
yeah.
I think it'd be, maybe you should say, instead of the school district would be required, you probably should say could be required. Because actually it's kind of a convoluted formula, that if the boiler breaks, depending on how much it costs, you have to bring it up to
Oh,
ADA.
right.
And then if you put so much money into a remodeling for ADA and it gets over a certain percentage of the value of the total value of the school, then it kicks in the full code. So
All right.
instead of
I'll
getting into
work
the
on
weeds,
that
just
one.
put
Okay.
could instead of would.
All right.
That really, I mean, we have to be accurate.
That
so
undercuts.
But that undercuts the letter quite a bit.
I think
You're
so,
saying
too.
would?
Yeah, because if it's a could, it's just speculation now.
Well, we know
Yes.
that they can't use certain parts of the building right now because of the HVAC. So I know just from the estimate that we got for town hall for our thermostat replacement, we have pneumatic controls. It's like over $200,000.
Right, it probably would, but
Yeah.
I suppose there's a
All right.
scenario where it might not.
I'm gonna I'll rewrite it, we'll take a look at it, but, you're right, that going to code, it has to show that, to bring it up to code, maybe mom's thing there, our children deserve better, will become a little bit even more important,
Right.
on it. Okay, to go on, back to the
Jerry,
agenda,
Jerry,
next thing, this is
Jerry.
pretty short.
Jerry, Peter,
Oh, yes,
because we can't do this through the email, so I may as well get these ideas out there.
oh,
I don't know if you want to include this point or not, but it's something you should consider that we've got $1.3 million that the towns have already appropriated for this. And most of that money's been spent on all this design and development that we've done so far. So, and we wouldn't get that back if the project got voted down, and we'd have to spend it again. So that's just one point that maybe there's not room for, and I don't know how important it is, but it's something. And then the only other thing would be that I thought it was starting over would set the project back at least 3 years. Assuming that we could get financing and all, which would be very low
You will
odds.
not get financing, Peter.
Right, we're not gonna, in
Turn it over.
construction cost rising all the while. Yeah, no
Harry
one,
Tartanian's article states with data, you will never get that money back. You will never get a second chance, ever.
Yeah, okay. Good, Pete.
that's it.
All right. Okay, let me move on to the next item on the agenda, which was the capital plan working group. Okay. Last meeting, we talked about trying to create a subcommittee potentially on the capital plan to work with Rich and so forth. And Steve Cole was bright enough to say, what were you thinking here, Jerry? Because that would create open meeting problems, so that you would have to create the subcommittee, and that would have to have noticed meetings and open meetings and so forth, which would not necessarily help in working out that capital plan. So we thought about potentially getting just a working group, a couple of people, but town council says anything with more than one person to go help Rich, and we learned that today, would again require an open meeting, be a public open meeting. So I'm going to put this on, I just learned of this, just put it on a agenda when I think there's a slot where we might have a little time to talk about it, whether or not we want to just have one person assigned to be our capital plan expert and work with Rich and Jackie on that, and then come back and help facilitate any discussions we have at the finance committee. And so I haven't really thought it through, and I'm raising with you, think about it, and when it's on the agenda, we'll talk about it, because and I haven't really talked with Rich and Jackie whether they would want to have public meeting kind of working group with that, or just one person. So it's a little bit premature to take any further steps, but I just wanted you an update to let you know where we are. Any questions on that? All right. Jackie, I don't know if you're still there. You have anything you want to add? Any other update?
No, but I do have the only other option that John Giorgio gave me is something that I've used on topical things before, like the town administrator or the town manager can appoint a working group that's not a public body necessarily. So I could select members, or you could tell me to select members, but but it kind of goes against the spirit in this case.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I'll be right.
okay. Do you
I was
have any
thinking
other?
maybe you could do a one person and then an alternate, like someone, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any other updates from you, Jackie, from?
No.
for us? Nope. Any new business?
I've got a question, Jerry,
Yeah,
for Jackie. Has the marijuana store opened up? It was supposed to open up in February, or is it going to?
I haven't heard an update from him. Again, all the local permitting is done. He's only waiting for the Cannabis Control Commission.
Okay.
all right. Anything else?
Does Jackie have any update on the COVID vaccination program?
No, we're still waiting for, we're ready to go. We're still waiting for a steady supply of vaccine and approval.
It's not healthy to inject air.
No.
Any other new business? All right, I will thank you. Now, our next meeting is next Wednesday, and I think the chief of police is scheduled for that, and we'll be there. So I hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Russ moves to adjourn. Second is Rick. And any discussion? All in favor, we go here. Mary.
Aye.
Steve Cole. I don't see Steve. I'll skip. Russ,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
and was Steve there?
There he is.
I don't know if Steve's there, but I'll give him a chance. Anyway, he can wave. I didn't see him. Okay. And I vote yes, so it's 7-0, and be safe, be well. Talk to you next week.